I'm going to introduce our speakers today. We have Raya Raeva and Svetla Baeva. They are human rights campaigners, both of them, for causes such as women's, LGBT and children's rights, especially in Bulgaria. And they're here to present to us this book, Vagina Matters, which is a sex education book for girls in Bulgaria. Fine Acts is the organization which made it, and that's a global creative studio which uses art to create social change. So I'm really interested to hear in what is our 13th digital talk more about this issue in Bulgaria and the region and maybe globally, and to discuss sex education. Also, I just realized I didn't introduce myself. I'm Malcolm. I'm a volunteer in Brčko, Bosnia, on the Volunteer for Peace program. I work for an organization here and online with Asfar and the Resolve Network. And these talks began last year as a way of kind of keeping activities going in this online time. And it's still necessary, like, as we just said, about all these corona problems in Eastern Europe everywhere. So anyway, without further ado, I think I'm just going to hand over to Svetla and Raya.
Thanks so much, Malcolm. I'm going to kick it off. So thank you to everyone that's joined us or will be listening in to the talk today. And thank you for the invitation to have this conversation. We're excited to be able to talk more about Vagina Matters and its larger goal. So as Malcolm said, I'm Svetla Baeva, and together with Raya, we're the authors of Vagina Matters, which is an illustrated sex ed book for girls. I'm also the campaign's director at Fine Acts, which stands behind the creation and publishing of the book here in Bulgaria. And just a little bit about me, I have a background in political science and communications, and I've been an activist and campaigner for over 10 years, not yet, 10 years. And I've worked on a wide range of human rights issues and campaigns from women's and LGBTI rights to juvenile justice reform in Bulgaria. And prior to joining Fine Acts, I used to be the campaigns and communications director at the Bulgarian Helsinki Committee, which is the leading human rights group in the country, which is also where me and Raya met. And we managed to work on a number of women's rights campaigns together, particularly around campaigns against violence on women, and more broadly, campaigns about popularizing Bulgaria's women's history, popularizing things like important contribution by women in the early 20th century, as well as kind of key moments around access to education and voting rights, which are largely shrouded in obscurity. I mean, they weren't even on Wikipedia. So a little bit about Fine Acts. Our team works at the intersection of art and human rights, and we believe that art is a really powerful tool to talk about social issues and engage more people in an open way in human rights work. And what we do is we're very committed to developing creative campaigning and human rights innovation in order to amplify really important human rights work that's being done on the ground. And we do this by interdisciplinary collaborations, producing powerful art. Here are some examples that on the screen. You can see some of our actions that we did in the past. We've been involved in building creative campaigns and also supporting activists and organizations around the world. We provide a lot of resources that are helpful to activists and organizations in their own work. And yeah, over to you, Raya, to kind of talk a little bit more about, who stands behind Vagina Matters.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi, Malcolm, and thanks to you and Asfar for having us today. My name is Raya, and together with Svetla, we are the authors of Vagina Matters, an illustrated sex education book for girls in Bulgarian. And I'm very happy that we'll have the opportunity to tell you more about the book. But first, let me introduce myself as well. I'm a human rights activist and campaigner with more than 6 years of experience of communications and campaigning. I have my academic background in philosophy and media studies. Recently, I completed my master's degree in new media and digital culture at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. And now I work for a global organization called Afotun International, which is based in Amsterdam, although I'm here in Sofia and work remotely. Afotun offers social and financial education to children and young people around the world. And prior to joining Afotun, I worked in Bulgarian Helsinki committee. As Svetla mentioned, we met there and we worked together for a few years. And we did a number of great campaigns together, focusing on women's rights, but not only. And that's where actually the idea of Vagina Matters started a few years ago. And here on the screen, you also see the pictures of our two illustrators, the illustrators of the book, Borislava and Mihaela Karadjovi. They're amazing illustrators and they're sisters. They work together. They both graduated from the National Academy of Arts in Sofia and have been working on a great number of socially engaged projects and campaigns. So that's the team behind the book. We can go to the next slide now. Thank you. So how it all started. I'm going to tell you more about how it all started and how we got this idea of creating a book together. We were initially triggered by very dark statistics about Bulgaria that were showing that only 10% of schools in the country teach sex education, according to a statement by the Bulgarian Ombudsman from 2017, but not much changed since then. And also we found out that Bulgaria, along with Romania, has the highest numbers in teenage pregnancies in the European Union. And this, I think this is how it started. We were really triggered by those statistics and also motivated by our own experiences growing up without adequate sex education. So we wanted to create a book by women, for girls and young women, passing on important information about growing up. And we decided that we'd like to focus on the experiences of girls and women because they are affected in specific ways by the lack of sex education. And it's known that in countries where there are no sex education programs at school and where these topics are considered taboos, young girls and boys have sex for the first time much earlier than comparing to other countries. And also that unwanted pregnancies and abortions are more widespread. Actually, many young people learn about sex through internet and through trial and error, and they rely on information which is not verified. So by writing this book, we wanted to encourage a positive conversation and a positive culture of curiosity and openness about the topic. And we decided to follow some good examples by other countries in Western Europe. One of them is the Netherlands, which is considered as one of the international leaders in sex education. And what they do differently is their approach. They try not to focus that much on the negative aspects and the negative sides of the topic, but to show the good examples and to encourage a conversation about relationships and about communications between partners and even pleasures. And those conversations are starting from a very early age. So that's how it started. We can go to the next slide, I think now.
Here you can see some of the illustrations from Vagina Matters. It's basically, as Raya said, it's motivated by the concrete problems and our own personal experiences that we've had in the past with the lack of sex education in schools. And so we created this book with educational information and practical tips that were relevant for girls growing up between the ages of 12 and 14. But of course, not only. The book is really available also for women, older girls, and it's a great guidebook which can be read at any stage of growing up. We focused, let's go skip to this slide. We focused on 8 key chapters, which are around body, menstruation, body image, sexual orientation and gender identity, masturbation, sex, health, and protection from violence. We really wanted to focus on issues that young people were faced with on a kind of a daily level, and had lots of questions about each of these topics. A lot of people asked us, like, why focus only on girls? A lot of people have asked us, why not focus also on boys? And we focus specifically on the girls because, as Raya said, they're affected in specific ways by the lack of sex ed, and we really wanted to answer those specific experiences and needs. And first there's the little knowledge of the female reproductive organs, even among older women. So not knowing how your body functions, as well as the specific problems that Raya outlined. So early teenage pregnancies, as well as violence against women. And another issue, which is a major issue, are the damaging issues regarding body image that have a lasting impact on mental health and future relationships. And that's something we also wanted to tackle with the way we talk about in the book, the way we approach things. Overall, too many young people, both boys and girls, learn about sex online or through trial and error, their own experiences. And because of the lack of sex ed in schools, there's no unified kind of source for information. And also a lot of parents have a lot of difficulty speaking about sex ed at home. Because they really don't know where to start from, and they also come from these generations of whole generations of people who don't have the language for these conversations. So we really wanted to be able to create a book that would enable people to become basically sexual health advocates for themselves. And Raya touched upon briefly of the approach. And we wanted a positive approach to relationships in sex ed. So we didn't want only to focus on the don'ts and the risks, because usually, we're constantly being told what we shouldn't do and what we should be scared of. And of course, these are really important. But it's also important to know what the do's are and how we can have a positive relationship, not only with others, but also with ourselves, which can be based on respect and dignity. So instead of using didactic language, which is often the case in such books, we wanted to focus on asking questions and provoking young people to really question their surroundings, question what they hear, what they see. And because of the general lack of dialogue around sexual health issues, it was important for us to present our selected topics in a really easy to understand way, and really friendly, while at the same time not shying away from using direct language, and giving young people the words that are necessary to describe their own experiences. So throughout this 250-page book, which is accompanied by more than 100 illustrations created by Borislava and Michaela, these illustrations really helped us to complement the language. We wanted the illustrations to speak to the girls. We wanted them to be engaging, to be diverse, to be funny, to be silly. We wanted the kids to feel like they weren't really reading exactly a textbook, but rather something that was friendly and encouraging, that they could open up every once in a while when they had a question. And of course, the book doesn't cover absolutely everything that there is on sex ed, but it's definitely a really great starting point for a young girl. And overall, the main messages that are running throughout the book are ones of empowerment, of self-acceptance, empowerment through knowledge, of what the body is, what are the desires, what is the language to express these, the needs, the boundaries. And in this sense, we included also a section on women's rights and feminism as a way to understand these experiences even further, not merely as standalone ones, because most often a lot of the experiences girls go through are shared, and whether it's related to struggles of self-acceptance or possibly gender-based violence, we really wanted people to see these in a larger context and to know that they're not alone and that we have a power to generally change things when we work collectively or in solidarity. Here is just a picture of our website. We also created a website where they're kind of to follow the journey of the book as it develops. So it can be accessed at vaginamatters.org. And over to you, Raya, to tell us a little bit more about how it was created and our campaign.
Thank you. Yes. How we created the book, it's been quite a journey. I think we started more than 3 years ago, and initially we had this idea about creating something more like a zine, something that consists of 50 pages maximum. But then as Svetla just explained, we wanted to touch upon many more and more topics. So the content became bigger and bigger. And because we are not experts in sex education, and we are not expert in sexual health, the book was consulted by many numbers of experts, doctors, psychologists, also lawyers, sexual health experts, because we wanted to be completely and absolutely sure that the information we provide is correct and trustworthy. And in May 2019, we we launched our Indiegogo fundraising campaign on the International Day of Action on Women's Health, which is celebrated on 28th of May. We had huge support, and I think we're going to see some numbers in the next slide, but the campaign was very successful, and I think this was an important moment for us because it showed us that we have much more support than we expected, and that Vagina Matters is not just a project that matters to us only, but that there is a huge need for a bigger conversation and more comprehensive conversation around topics around sex education in Bulgaria, and that there is a necessity of aids to help this conversation going, aids like books or other tools. So we managed to reach more than 10,000 people, and we had nearly 200 supporters that supported the book and made it possible for us to actually complete the process and have it published. Yeah, from around 20 countries in Europe, but not only. And this was a great experiment and great success in the end. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay. And tell more about the launch.
Yeah, so after several years of work, a lot of research, a lot of arranging a lot of partnerships, we were finally able to launch last year on October 11th, which is International Girls' Day. We released Vagina Matters. We initially first published it just on our website. The idea was to make the book available to as many people as possible, so you can read it for free online. And then at the end of December last year, it also came out in print and is currently being distributed by one of the largest bookstores and publishers in the country. While we had created a very strong community around the book during our crowdfunding campaign, actually was a great experience involving donors and partners in our work. We knew that when this book came out, that it would get a reaction, and we knew that, especially because of the context that we live in Bulgaria, and kind of the wider context globally in terms of women's rights issues. And I just want to give you a little bit of context. In the last 4 years, we've had a ruling coalition government formed by GERB, which is a center-right conservative political party here. And they ruled together with the United Patriots, which is an ultra-nationalist coalition. And the United Patriots have made it extremely difficult over the last years to progress on various human rights issues. And they've blocked really important legislation and policies around, for example, the ratification of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, also known as the Istanbul Convention. But also, for example, the adoption of a really important children's rights strategy at the end of last year. So they've led a number of smear campaigns against the LGBTI movement in Bulgaria and have attacked women's rights and Roma rights, as well as a number of civil society organizations working in these areas. And it's very similar to what's been going on in other Eastern European countries like Poland or Hungary. And overall, there's a serious global backlash against women's rights at the moment, and specifically sexual and reproductive rights. And this has not bypassed Bulgaria as well. So when our book came out, it was initially the target of an anti-LGBTI and anti-women smear campaign. A number of the politicians from the United Patriots, the ones you see on the left, and specifically a particular far-right political party came out with a statement calling to ban the book and prosecute anyone that was involved with the book. And these reactions, which hope to gain political standing by politicizing the subject, were short-lived, but yet quite noisy. And they quickly did die down over a couple of days. But looking back at this reaction, we see a lot of positive aspects. We think it, to a large extent, reopened the discussion around sex education, and it really made a lot of the myths, stereotypes, and fears that exist in our society, which are usually not voiced because these are taboo topics. It was easier to understand, to see these myths and fears, and then easier to talk about them. And I mean, as we know, change rarely occurs without tension or conflict. So the next step forward would be, working on each of these myths or stereotypes that exist in our society together, collectively. So for the launch of our campaign, we organized a giveaway, actually, of the book, and we asked people to share why they should receive a book. Amidst what was going on with the political parties, which actually did us a great service, because we could have never hoped for such great PR. And we received hundreds of messages from women all across the country who shared their own personal experiences. I wanted to share a couple of them from them. A lot of the women talked about about their first period, or even experiences of violence, difficulties in their relationships, really sharing things that are difficult to share. And this one in particular, for me, sexual education, or rather self-knowledge, getting to know one's own body, are extremely important. And like most children, my mother approached the issue in a very kind way when it comes to menstrual issues. However, it seems to me that it took me many years. I actually got to know myself and accepted and love myself, as I am. I believe that every girl should be encouraged to accept and love herself, as well as to explore her body and its desires and needs. Actually, we chose this one because there's a common thread running through all the stories, all the experiences that were shared. And it was regarding the effect of the lack of adequate or sex education at all. A lot of women grow up with a negative attitude towards their body, which affects their self-acceptance, confidence levels, and intimate relationships. And that was really runs as a common thread throughout all the stories that we received. And it's really at the core also of the book. Yeah. So but I can tell you a little bit more about the last 5 months of work that have gone around since the launch.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, a few months later, what's happening? As Svetla just shared, we received so many messages of support, and so many of our readers reached back and shared their experiences with the book, shared pictures and messages. This is keep going. We still receive many messages of support, and now the book is being distributed, as Svetla said, in Bulgarian by one of the largest bookstores in the country, so accessible in print as well. We can go to the next slide. We managed to take part in 2 exhibitions here in Sofia. you see pictures on the screen. Even though there was a pandemic, a few of them happened. Overall, we are happy because we reached over sorry, can we go to the next slide? Yes, some numbers again. So we reached more than 80,000. The book was read by over 80,000 times online on the website. It's accessible in Bulgarian and everyone could have access to it. And also a lot of teachers and a lot of social workers reach out to us from many points in Bulgaria, and they ask us to send books and to have them so they can use them during their work. And we reached more than 30 towns and cities in Bulgaria. As Svetla said, we organized this challenge and we distributed the books. And we were featured in more than 20 international and national publications in the media. So actually, yeah, the response was pretty great.
And so in terms of next steps, first of all, of course, we plan to continue working and talking about Vagina Matters in Bulgaria. We're working on building and mobilizing a community here that cares about these issues. And we hope that when the pandemic subsides a little bit more, we'll be able to gather in groups and to have conversations about the issues we raised in the book face to face. It's something that we haven't had enough of and had a chance to do over the last year. And in addition, one of the core principles of Finax is openness. So, which means that's one of the reasons why we, of course, published the book for free online. But we've also published it under a special license. And the goal is really to empower organizations anywhere to translate it into their own language and adapt it, of course, to their own context, because the context is different everywhere. And we've already had some people reach out to us with ideas to possibly translate it in other languages. In the first such collaboration, Finax is working with Day, which is a gyno health innovator in the UK, along with UK's leading sexual health and well-being charity for young people called Brook. And together we're working on the English edition, which should be out quite soon. So overall, the book has really taken on a life of its own, and we're looking forward to seeing where its journey takes us. Thanks so much. That's the end from us.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was great. It was really interesting to hear more of this story and get to know a bit of context for it. I have some, I have a question to start, but if anyone wants to jump in with a question first, please do. Please, you can unmute yourself and do it. If not, I'll do it. Okay. My question is about this thing that you just mentioned. This idea, the book could be translated into other languages. It would have to be different according to the different contexts. My question is, how would you see that I mean, you could talk about a different country, or how could it be effective in another country? What kind of differences in approach would you need? Are there any countries that have similar enough problems that it could be done in the same way? I don't know.
We realized even with the English translation that the book would even have to be adapted to the context. So it actually involved a lot of rewriting even. So it isn't even a direct translation. Many parts have been reworked to fit the context or to present information that is relevant for young people in their own country, because they want to read things that reflect their own experiences so that they can get the best help and support that they can in their own situation. So, I mean, any kind of such work would have to be done in collaboration with someone in that respective country, simply because we would need to work with people who really know the context and really also have access to young people as a starting point, and to give further backing for the book. But in other ways, which it could be adapted, of course, it's even the illustrations can be adapted to reflect the reality of kids somewhere else.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know, I was thinking also about these places that, I mean, you mentioned Hungary and Poland, but there's also in some Balkan countries kind of right-wing shifts or problems with women's rights. So it could be interesting to see if other countries had an interest.
We had, for example, a specific request from UNHCR and the Red Cross here in Bulgaria, who was interested in translating parts of the book to an audience like refugees and migrants. But because of specific, like even cultural differences, there would be parts that would only specific parts of the book would be translated. So it's a complicated issue, and it's also an editorial issue. Like, what do you leave? What do you take out? And that's also those are difficult choices to make sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. Does anyone else have a question to add?
I would have to ask something. So I'm Amina. I'm the international project manager from Asfar, but I am living in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So listening to your presentation, I could relate a lot with the period when I was in the school system, etc. So my question is actually, how for you was to actually reach the kids who are in school? Because I know it's very complicated here to even get into the school as an NGO. You're normally not even allowed. So is there a positive feedback from the schools that you can enter and show your books, or are they accepting the book as part of the school system or some classes or something similar?
Do you want to start, Raya? Or
yes, thank you, Amina. Actually, the pandemic prevented us from being able to go to schools and talk with the kids directly, which we were planning to do. But for now, it's not possible because most of the classes are still going online here in Bulgaria. But we do have amazing partners. I think I forgot to mention them in the beginning. A few organizations we are working at. One of them is called Wolf Guide, and they also provide sex education advices and knowledge to young people through great videos they're producing. And they go to the classes and have lessons at schools. So we hope that someday when the schools open again, we'll be able to join them and meet students in person.
Yeah, I have another thing to add to that. It's very difficult to enter schools. I mean, even that's why we partnered with Love Guide, because they had already established some kind of access. And especially about this topic, it's very difficult. There were a lot of scandals in the last couple of years, particularly led by this far-right political party, which has made it very difficult for NGOs to enter. But there are some that do have programs, like our partner, they work in 40 schools across the country. So it's one way to enter the school, but we've been trying to reach young people in other ways. So largely now our way has been reaching out to ambassadors. So we have this, as Raya mentioned before, we have around 40 ambassadors, whether these are activists really active in a like young community or organizations who are working in very like in really small towns, or you know, they're not in the major cities, and they have been helping us also because they find this book is a way to guide their own conversations with young people. So there's been several routes, but definitely the pandemic has been made it difficult.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. Just on that same topic, I was wondering when you said like it's been teachers have reached out to you. You described that there's no sex education on the curriculum in Bulgaria. Do teachers have some kind of wiggle room or freedom to kind of try and put something in like this book, or is that also going to be quite challenging for them?
They have wiggle room. They can decide whether and how they can just talk about sexual health. But because the background of teachers all across the country is very diverse, and you know, this could be a positive aspect, this could be a negative aspect. I mean, I think there was this one case with one teacher a couple of months ago, or like last year, who was telling her students, it was like this big news here in Bulgaria, was telling her students that the world was flat. And so the problem is when such information is not centralized, then you can have teachers who are really dedicated and doing a great job in introducing such topics, but then you might also have teachers who are maybe not doing it the right way, or don't know how to answer students' questions or needs, because, you know, it's also a two-way communication. So once you open up the subject, you're going to have this flood of questions from the other side. And yeah, that's, I had one more thing to add to this, but I forgot.
Okay, don't worry. Does anyone else have a question?
I have a question very quickly. You said about the short but quite intense, I think, campaign from some of the right-wing parties in government. And I was wondering if, when that was happening, did you get any support, or did anyone speak out in support of the book from maybe similar levels of, whether it's government or society on the other side, or not?
From government, no. No.
I don't think so, no.
It was mainly from society. So a couple of lawyers, psychologists, some other organizations. It's a very difficult topic, because at the same time, other organizations that are working in this area are a bit also scared, understandably so, because it might threaten their work down the line. So some of them also didn't want to end up in the line of fire. And we ourselves also chose a mode of reaction, which was to try to not make this bigger than it is, because we would only be fueling it, and it could hurt further down the line various organizations access to schools and to a further debate. So we're actually, yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, we had a lot of support by other activists and other organizations and public figures, but none of the other parties joined this conversation, and we decided to kind of ignore it, so it doesn't get any louder and bigger than this.
Yeah, because this noise just really, it kind of squishes the voices of other people and the voices that we wanted to hear, which were the voices of girls and women, which of course were once again, but we also had, it was actually pretty interesting. We had, so our printing house, they're also our partners. They actually had a lot of threats to them as well. So they were, people told, especially where they're working, people were asking them like, why are you printing this book? You shouldn't print this book. But they were really, really, really great. I mean, in such experiences, you find amazing people and partners all along the way. So we were really happy to be working with the partners that we chose. So that's what I would, I mean, if anyone is planning anything like this in the future, I would always suggest that's why it's important to have partners, you know, establish like a community before you launch anything, because it's a great support.
Thanks for that answer. Yeah. I also wanted to ask about the technique or the format, like is there something that can be done like by using this technique of, I don't know, really tactile, bright images and sort of positive, not overly complicated language, questioning method? Could it be used by, I don't know, smaller organizations for the same means with their own materials locally? I mean, what do you feel is the benefit of this style?
I would just like to share some, so I mean, in general, if we look at behavioral and cognitive science and like effective communications, one of the best ways to engage people is through visual information. So and especially information that inspires awe and is empowering and is hopeful. So, I mean, a lot of the book really reflects also kind of this thinking and these insights. And I think it's definitely very helpful, especially when you're talking about topics like this, where a lot of young people are curious, but also kind of shy and don't really know how to start conversations. We also strove to use illustrations that are not too kiddish, childish, in the sense that like we wanted kids to see themselves in these illustrations, which is not really the case usually with such books. Usually they're very a lot of text or illustrations that are kind of, they look like for 3-year-olds, but these are kids that are 13.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just feels like all of this was like treated like biology when I was in school. It wasn't treated as a separate thing. This wasn't universal in the UK, but it was in my school, and it isn't treated as like something holistic, emotional, something that can be shown artistically. So it's really wonderful to see it, and especially if it can be made more international. Does anyone else have questions?
Hi, it's Mira here. I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you so much for this initiative and for rolling this book out. And honestly, I didn't know about it until this talk. I stumbled upon the talk actually through the LGBTQI community on Instagram in Bulgaria. And that's how I knew about the talk. So I'm happy that I got the chance to be a part of this. And I'm super happy to see this initiative in Bulgaria. I'm half Bulgarian, half Lebanese. So I've never lived there, but I do know the stigma. Lived it myself at home as well. So I really just want to thank you. And I'm definitely putting an order now.
Thank you so much. We actually, in the book, we really wanted to include the conversation about LGBTI, also around trans voices, and because we think it's just such an important topic to be normalized from a younger age, to be talking about these things, because we all want to know and talk about sexual orientation, whether it's about gay or hetero, it doesn't matter, but we need to be talking about these things, and also about gender identity. So really happy that you got this through the LGBTI community in Bulgaria.
I just have a short question. So when can we expect the English version?
Well, it was already supposed to be out last year, but it keeps getting, at the end, it's always the most difficult, but it should be out very soon, probably by the mid of this year.
Great. I don't expect I would be able to read the Bulgarian version, so I will wait for the English one. Thank you.
Yeah, we could all try the Bulgarian. I'm not sure that after 1 year away I can do that. But the only other thing I wanted to ask, sorry, wait, if anyone else has a further question. Okay. The only other thing I would like to ask is, what are you working on for the future? What are your plans, either of you or both of you, with Fine Acts, etc.?
I guess we are still working on the book. And that means the Bulgarian edition as well, because we haven't had the chance to promote it in person, and to have a conversation in person with children and with our audience. So we are still looking for ways to distribute the book and to find new partners and new allies. So I think that's what happening in the next few months. And of course, the English edition comes next.
I would add to Raya's that we definitely see this book as not as something that we just want to launch and drop. So there's a lot of work that's going on now after the launch. For example, we're having conversations. This is the thing I forgot before. We're having conversations with an organization called Teach for Bulgaria, which is a lot of teachers, young people that are sent to teach in various schools, sometimes very dilapidated schools or schools without resources, for 2 years. And so there's a huge network. So we're having conversations with them regarding using the book in their own schools, or adding it to their libraries and things like that. So it's this ongoing slow conversations that we're having. It's a lot of slow growth, just like how it was built. So yeah, I mean, of course, in terms of Fine Acts, we're doing a lot of things here in Bulgaria, but also abroad. There's one really cool project which might be useful for all of you. It's called thegreats.co. It's an awesome resource for organizations, activists everywhere. It has free illustrations, basically, that can be used. They're illustrations on human rights issues. They're socially engaged, so they're a pretty cool resource for any NGO.
What's the name of that?
I'm just going to stop this share.
Thegreats.co. Okay. Thegreats.co and Vagina Matters. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that is. And does anyone else have another question? Okay. I think that we're gonna call it there. I just want to say thank you so much to Svetla and Raya for everything you've told us and for doing something really important. It must have been important if you got such a crazy backlash, and the response as well was so moving to see from girls and women in Bulgaria. And yeah, just thank you so much. And we just want to say that there will be another digital talk on the 21st of April. We're in April. Wow. Okay. And that will be with Jo Wilkie, I believe. And she's going to talk about resilience or something related to the topic of resilience. Yeah. So there'll be more promo to come from Asfar on that. And thank you for coming. Yeah.